we're gonna start. Okay, so as you know, we are in the module related to skills. We started talking about reading, the reading skill. In the first section, we talked about some aspect related to reading, right? Can you remember? Can you remember something about the last session we had? First, let me ask you some questions. The first and the most important question, what is reading? Can you remember? What is reading? Tell me please, according to what we saw the last session, what is reading? Can you remember? Yes, tell me please your answers, your ideas. What is reading?
Good evening, teacher. Reading is a process, and we can find two types of reading, the extensive reading and the intensive reading.
Yeah, okay. All right. For example, today we're going to focus more on these two types of readings. So as your partner said, reading is related to a process. No? And what are we going to do in this process? What are we going to do in this process? There were two aspects when we read something. Can you remember? Can you remember these two aspects involved in this process of reading? No, nobody? Tell me, don't be afraid. Maybe you cannot use your microphone, you can write it in the chat. You can use these two ways to communicate, to talk, or to express your ideas. You cannot use your microphone, you can use the chat. As your partner said, reading is a process. And she mentioned two types of reading. No, this is what we're going to talk about today, intensive and extensive reading. But what is in this process involved? What exactly are we going to do in this process? Cindy. Cindy mentioned something in the chat. Concept driving. Yeah, all right. Yeah, this is a technical name, no? The technical name. What else? Tell me. No more ideas. A process of what are we gonna do?
It's a cognitive process. Learning process.
Yes, Yuri. Excellent. It's a cognitive process. Yes, that's it. Tell me more. What is reading? What is it involved in reading? No, nobody?
Teacher, it includes the psychologic process too, the cognitive and the psychologic process.
Yeah, all right. Cognitive and psychological process. All right. What else? No more. In order to read, to comprehend something, what does the reader do in this process? ¿Qué hace el lector cuando va a leer, redundando la palabra, un texto? What does he do? What does she do? No, nobody? Yeah, tell me, Abraham.
Reading as a process, can be silent or aloud.
Yeah, all right. Yes.
It's a process.
Yes, yes, you're right, Abraham. Yeah,
Hello?
all right. So it could be
Hello?
aloud or in a silent way. Excellent.
Understanding related to understand and comprehension of the words.
Yeah, this is one of the aspects involved in reading, to understand and decodify the letters, words. Yes, yes, that's it, that's it. Yeah, this is one aspect. But there is another one, another aspect involved apart from decodifying, no? So you call this decodifying the letters of words, understand the meaning of words. Yeah, you're right. You're completely right. But there is something more involving reading.
Teacher, in this process, it is important the previous knowledge of the reader.
Excellent, Lucy. This is the other aspect and fundamental aspect involving reading. When we read something, obviously, we are going to decodify, we are going to decodify the letters, words, understand the meaning to comprehend the text. But we are going to use also our knowledge, our previous knowledge. And how do we call this knowledge? This previous knowledge that we have? How do we call it? It has a special name. This previous knowledge that we have, the reader has this knowledge, previous knowledge or background knowledge.
Formal schemata.
Exactly. The schema or schemata. Yes. So the reader is going to use this schemata. And what is he going to do? He is going to make a contrast. No? He's going to make a contrast using this prior knowledge, this schemata, with that test, the information that he decodifies, no? Because he's going to decodify information. So he's going to make a contrast. And so we talked about these two terms. We talked about these two terms. Notice here, the bottom-up processing and the top-down processing. For example, Cindy, I think so. Cindy talked about one of them, no, the concept driving. Remember, bottom-up processing or data driving, it requires a sophisticated knowledge of the language itself. So here you're going to analyze the language. You're going to decodify, notice, you're going to decodify these letters, these words, these phrases, and the text. So we call this the bottom-up processing. And then we use the other one. The other one is that top-down processing or conceptually driven. We draw on our own intelligence and experience, as Fiorella, if I'm not wrong, yes, Fiorella and Laura says, not talked about experience. So our prior knowledge. And one of you mentioned, no, formal content. So formal is about our life, no, about our experiences, no, the knowledge of the world, no. And the other one is related to the language, no, the knowledge that we have about our own language and the foreign language or the second language. So notice here we have these two aspects. When we read, no, when a person starts reading, so we're going to use these two processes, the bottom up and the top down. So doing this here in the bottom up, remember what is involved in the bottom up process? Readers recognize a multiplicity of linguistic signals, such as letters, morphemes, syllables, words, phrases, grammatical roots or clues, discourse markers, from the small units to bigger units. No, the smallest one, letters or morphemes, no, syllables. Then with syllables, you make words. With words, you make phrases. With phrases, you make sentences. And you have some grammatical clues or rules. And in order to join these phrases or sentences, you're going to use some discourse markers. For example, today we're going to talk about these two, not the discourse markers. So in the bottom-up process, we're going to decodify, recognize this, linguistic signals. And also the reader uses this linguistic data processing mechanisms to impose some sort of order on these signals. So we're going to give an order using these mechanisms. And on the other side, on the top-down process, so readers draw on their own intelligence and experience to understand a text. So your prior knowledge, your schemata. That's why here you have a combination, because we talked about some theories. Top down is related to a theory and the bottom up is related to another theory, how to read or how to teach reading, all right? And we join these two because we're going to use both processes. Notice, we're going to use both processes when we read something, when we try to comprehend a text. The top down is related to predict probable meanings, and the bottom up related to check really what the writer says. And when we join these two, we have the interactive. Remember that we talked about different approaches or theories of reading, right? The top down, the bottom up, then we talked about the metacognitive, and finally we talked about the interactive. Metacognitive, remember, that is related to analyze how you read, why you read, the purpose of reading and the results of reading, and what strategies or techniques are you going to use to read something. So this is the metacognitive, all right? The analysis of how you read, why you read. But we mostly use, notice, we mostly use these two processes, all right? The top down, it means that you're going to predict probable meaning because you're going to compare it with your knowledge, all right? You're going to compare it with your knowledge, your prior knowledge, your schemata. That's why he says that you're going to predict something. And the bottom up is to decodify what the writer wants to say in the test. You're going to decodify the information given in the test. So this is the bottom up. Joining these two, we have the interactive. All right. That's why I showed you a picture related to that. Notice, can you remember about this picture? We have these up and down arrows. Up and down, up and down, up and down means that you're going to use both processes. Notice both processes. In the top, you have your mental schemata. So your background knowledge, knowledge about the language and literacy, cultural values and beliefs. This is at the top. Then you have at the bottom, you have the data, the new data to be processed, the new information to be decodified. So the shapes and sounds of the letters, the meaning of words or phrases, and some grammatical information. So you're going to use both. They are going to interact. Notice, they are going to interact each other, and we call this comprehension. All right? This is comprehension. So what is comprehension? When the reader matches the data and a schema. So the reader, in simple terms, is going to match, notice, is going to match the information given in the text, because he's going to decodify it by understanding the shape, sounds of letters, meaning of words or phrases, and some grammatical information. He's going to decodify this data, this information, and is going to match with the schema. So it means with his or her prior knowledge, background knowledge, knowledge about the language also. It's not just, the knowledge that this person has related to the culture, customs, beliefs, values, and so on. It's not just it. That's why we have two, no? Formal and content stigmata. The knowledge of the language too, and literacy. Notice, literacy, language and literacy. So he is going to match, no? The person, he or she, the person is going to match the data, the information in the test with the schema, the background knowledge about the world and about the language. Remember, the schema, schemata is the knowledge that you have about the world and about the language. We have two knowledges, all right? Okay, so this is what we talked about the last session, right? So we have this, the schema theory and background knowledge. So according to this theory, the schema theory and background knowledge, a test does not by itself carry meaning. So it needs some prior knowledge to be decodified. The reader brings information, knowledge, emotions, experiences, and culture. We call this schemata to the printed word, to the printed test. Notice here the importance of the reader. The importance of the reader. The reader is going to be an active participant of the reading process, not a passive one. An active participant of the reading process, because he's going to bring some information too. Apart from the information that he could find in the test, he is also bringing some information to this test. Skill in reading depends on the efficient interaction between linguistic knowledge and knowledge of the world. Notice here, these two aspects, the linguistic knowledge and the knowledge of the world. So we are going to join these two, all right? That's why, when we were talking about the last session too, that's why the interpretation that we could find in a test could be different according to the person who is going to read it. It depends on the values, beliefs, or the knowledge of the language that this person has. And it's going to decodify or interpret it in different ways. All right? They are not going to have the same interpretation, the same decodification, or the same comprehension. They're going to have different interpretations and decodifications. All right? So notice, this is what we talked about the last class. No? This is like a review. Yeah, this is like a review about the different things that are related to the process of reading. No, don't forget it. Reading involves two main aspects: the information given in the test and the information that the reader brings. And the reader is going to use these two processes, no, the bottom-up and the top-down processes, and make an interactive process of reading. All right? Don't forget about it. Now, let me show you. This is a technique that maybe you have heard about it, or maybe you have used it before. So you have to tell me if you have used it before, you have heard about it. Now, this technique is the Kwl chart. Have you heard about this? The Kwl chart. Have you ever heard it, or have you ever used it? Yes or no? Have you heard about this term? This is a technique that we could use when we work with reading lessons, no? And here we're going to join these theories of reading, the top-down, the bottom-up, the metacognitive, and we use also the interactive. Nobody? The Kwl chart. For example, let me tell you something about it. I could realize that I saw this term when I was a student, but then I get back into the present because my little kid, no, I have a little kid, he is 4 years old. So one of the teachers that he had used this technique, and notice this is a very little kid, use this technique, and I got surprised because I saw this technique for a long time ago, and I want to show you. Maybe you have seen it and you have used it. Maybe you don't know exactly the name. This is it, the Kwl chart. Have you seen it before? Yes or no? Have you seen it before?
No, I haven't, teacher.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. So notice the letter K represents what you already know. So you give this chart to your students before reading, notice, and you want them to tell you what is the prior knowledge that they have before reading a test. Notice, maybe you tell them the topic of the test, so they could guess the topic of the test just by watching the title or some pictures, no? Because we usually use this technique, no? Before reading, oh yeah, I made my students have questions related to the title of the test or the article, the paragraph that they are going to read, or maybe I can show them some pictures in order to guess, to predict what the test is going to be about, right? But then you could use this in order to get some information about their prior knowledge, their schemata. Notice the letter K is what they already know about the topic of the test. What do they know about it? The letter W, notice the letter W is what they want to know, their expectations. They are going to predict, notice, their predictions about the test that they are going to read. Oh yeah, teacher, I think the test is going to be about something related to sales or vacations or holidays, no, or accidents. And they are going to predict using this chart. Notice, using this chart. And the last column, the third column, the letter L, is what they have learned. So when they finish this lesson, could be you could use this not just for reading lesson, you could use it for every lessons. Remember, when we talk about reading lesson, it doesn't mean that we are going to do just do reading skill activities. No, we use a lot of skills, no? So this is the whole language approach, no? Remember, no, the whole language approach, that we are going to use other skills in a reading lesson. So you could use this chart whatever you want, no? But I'm giving you as an example in order to start a reading lesson, no? What I have learned. Notice, for example, as I told you before, this teacher, my kid's teacher, so we had to draw it because now you know that we have this virtual education. So we have to draw in a wall chart, and the teacher start asking questions, not about the test. What type of test is it? Is this a story or a tale? No, a very short story, no, because it was just a little kid. What I want to know, according to the title, no, the wolf and the little Red Riding Hood. Oh yeah, what happens with the wolf, or what happens with the little Red Riding Hood? Notice. Oh, Zoraida, your microphone, please. Thank you. So notice, and what they have learned when they finish reading this test, so the teacher start asking some questions related to the test. Comprehension questions. Notice, here we have the two processes. The two processes. The bottom up and the top down. Using this chart. Using this chart. So, here I'm going to show you more examples. Here the letter K before reading, yeah, before reading. Then want to know, it is also before reading, and learn after reading. Notice here, you have this other example related to the KWL, and I'm gonna show you one more. Here you have, instead of a want to know, you have wonder. Know before you read, write what you think you know about the topic. Wonder before or during your reading. Notice now two steps of reading lesson. Before or during your reading, recall questions about the topic. This is for more advanced students, yeah, advanced level students. And learn after you finish reading, write what you learned about the topic. Notice here we are using these two processes, no? The prior knowledge, of our students, and the decodification, the information given in the test. All right. So notice here these processes. Now I want to show you this chart because I think it exemplifies, in a good way, these two processes. No? But this is not the only one. Huh? Then we're going to see more activities and more techniques related to the reading skill. Yeah? But this is in order to get it in clear and to have a clear idea what is involved in reading. Yeah? Remember, reading involves two main aspects. The data that the test is going to have, and you need to decodify it, and the information that you as a reader brings to the test. And you're going to compare, and you're going to use these two processes, these two kinds of get this comprehension. No? Remember, when you do this, you're comprehending. All right, now let's continue with the other one. And you were talking, or you told me when I asked you about reading. Let's see, types of classroom reading performance. What are these? Can you tell me? Can you remember? Can you tell me about it? And you mention it. You mention it. One of you mentioned it. No, no, no. Nobody. How can you make your students read in class? So this is the performance, no? Reading performance. Classroom reading performance.
Read aloud.
Yes, this is one. And the other one?
Reading for my test.
Yeah. All right. So notice here. When we talked about the reading performance in a classroom, we have two ways, two types. Silent, in a silent way, and in an oral way. All right? Silent and oral way. When we talked about the silent, this is divided in two. Intensive and extensive reading. Maybe you have heard about it before or not. Don't worry. We're going to talk about these two types of reading. Yeah? Silent, remember, silent reading is divided in two. Intensive and extensive. And at the same time, intensive and extensive is dividing in other subtypes too. For example, intensive is divided into linguistic and content reading. Notice, intensive reading is divided into linguistic reading and content reading. And on the other side, the extensive reading is divided into skimming, scanning, and global. For example, the last class we talked about just a few words related to skimming and scanning, no? So now we are going to focus more on these two ways to read in an extensive way. All right, so notice, generally we have two, silent and oral reading. Silent, we have two, intensive and extensive. And inside intensive, we have two again, linguistic and content. And extensive, we have three, skimming, scanning, and global. Let's see. We are going to talk about these aspects of the reading performance. Let's start talking about the oral reading. What is the oral reading? Zoraida told us, what is the oral reading? Can you remember what Zoraida said? No, nobody? What did Zoraida say? Okay, Zoraida. Oh, I cannot hear you well. Can you hear me well? ¿Me escuchan bien? Porque escuché a Zoraida, pero bien bajito y medio entrecortado. Can you hear me well? Yes?
Yes, teacher.
All right. So
Yes, teacher.
okay, so because I was worried, I thought it was my connection, but I think it's not. Be careful with the connection, Zoraida, because I hear you in a rarely way, like a robot. All right, yes, you're right, Zoraida. What Zoraida said is, what is the oral reading? The act of reading printed or written text aloud. Yes, Laura, very good, Laura. When you read aloud, all right? When you read aloud, a printed or written text. And tell me, please, do you think, oh, let's change the question. How do we use this oral reading? Why do we use the oral reading? As a teacher, no? As a teacher. Do you use oral reading in your class? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we make our students to read something aloud, right? Maybe a test is divided in paragraphs and you choose or you tell some students to be volunteers to read one paragraph, no, one paragraph. But why? Why do we use this oral reading?
Teacher, the oral reading is normally to see if it's correct, the pronunciation, I don't know, is correct vocalization, I don't know.
Yeah, the articulation.
The articulation, yeah.
All right. Okay, that's good, Lucy. Something else? So Lucy says that this is used to check the pronunciation of our students, know how they articulate the sounds. Yeah, all right. No more. Valerio, Vanessa.
Get some pronunciation.
Oh. A lot of participants. Let's see. One, please. Just one. Because I have 3, 4.
Okay, can I
Vanessa, and then Valeria. Yeah, Vanessa and then Valeria.
Okay,
Vanessa.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Gatillon. Good evening, classmates. Yeah, in my case, I make my students reading because I want to them practice the pronunciation as one of my classmates said, and in this case, I like them to interact each other reading, for example, conversations in pairs, in groups of 3. I guess it's good for me in my class because it helps me get all the students involved. And that's in my.
All right, that's good, Vanessa. So Vanessa used this technique in order to get students interact each other. Okay, that's good. Specifically with conversations, dialogues, no? You told us. All right, yeah. So notice, for example, in this way, this is also a technique used to practice speaking, no? A guided speaking. We call this a guided speaking. It's not free speaking. So this is a guided speaking because they are going to read some conversations. All right, that's good. That's good, Vanessa. Valeria, do you want to say something else?
About that note, teacher, my microphone was wrong.
Oh, okay, okay, Vale. Don't
Yes,
worry,
that's
don't
the
worry.
reason why I did the meet and then I returned.
Okay, all right. That's good. That's good, Vale. Okay, Diana said something in the chat. The intonation. Oh, Lucy, no, Lucy. Intonation. Diana says the stress is so important for me. Yes, notice here. What is the purpose of using this, the oral reading in class? Teachers use it to track and measure a student's overall reading ability. What is that? What does it involve? Notice here. It involves, first, reading accuracy, then pronunciation, fluency. When we talk about reading, we also use this term, fluency. Sometimes we say, no, fluency, fluent teacher. No, fluency is for speaking, no? When they speak fluently, no, we know so many pauses. But when we read, we also use this term, fluency. So it means that they read in groups, no, word by word, no, because some students read, it involves reading, accuracy, so they don't have fluency. So we can check fluency in reading. So notice, and the last one is comprehension and understanding of punctuation. Notice the aspect that I consider when you make your students read aloud. So you're going to check, you're going to measure the reading accuracy, the pronunciation, the fluency, comprehension and understanding of punctuation. And that is involved in intonation and stress, no? When they read in a good way, fluently, so they are going to use a correct intonation, a correct stress. Richard, do you want to say something? Richard, are you there? You're
Present, teacher.
all right. Okay, Richard.
Sorry, my teacher.
Good evening, good evening. I thought you want to say something. All right, don't worry, Richard. So, notice here the purposes of oral reading, no? Sometimes, as Vanessa, for example, Vanessa uses more related to the speaking ability. When you make your student read conversations, dialogues, this is called also a guided speaking, right? Yeah, they are reading a test, like a conversation, but it's used most in the speaking ability. No, this is one of the techniques that you use when you want to practice the speaking ability. First, the student reads something, they practice a conversation, and then maybe you make your students change some words and they have to do it in front of the class without reading. So here you have some steps, but it's okay, All right, so notice here, the oral reading. Now, let's continue with the second one. The second one was the silent reading. Silent reading, it allows one to read without voicing the words. No? We don't pronounce anything. We don't say anything. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Can you hear me? Can you listen to me? Hello?
Yes, teacher. Yes.
All right. Okay. because I received a message that my internet connection wasn't stable. Please let me know if you cannot hear me well, or maybe my voice is like a robot, or you are not watching what I'm sharing. Please let me know at the moment, instantly, all right? Okay, so it allows one to read without voicing the words. It helps us read faster. Notice this is one of the benefits when you read in a silent way. It helps us read faster. It helps us make faster connections between words and gives us the silence we need to concentrate and process information. So notice here what is involved in silent reading and what is so beneficial for students. So they are gonna read faster, they are gonna make faster connection between words, and they have the opportunity to concentrate and process information better. All right, this is in the silent reading. And as you saw in the diagram in the chat before, the silent reading is divided in two, right? In extensive and intensive reading. So let's start talking about one of them, the extensive reading. What is the extensive reading? Can you tell me? What is that? Extensive reading. No ideas, no ideas. Have you heard this term before? Extensive reading.
Teacher,
Yeah, tell me, Lucy.
the extensive reading is like a superficial reading, and the intensive is more. You use more strategies, and this usually used when you are studying, no? I don't know if that is.
Yeah, yes, Lucy, you're right. Generally, extensive reading is seen as, well, we could call this a superficial, yeah, but I prefer not to call it superficial because you have to comprehend. Maybe a general reading, no? You are not going to get into some details, no? This is on the other side. The intensive reading, you have to get some detailed information about the test. So another idea about extensive, Lucy's idea was, okay, what's correct? Another idea about extensive reading, tell me your prior knowledge. If you don't know, teacher, sorry, I don't know. And don't worry if you don't know, because we are here to learn, to know about this term related to reading. If you know something about it, tell me, please. What is your schemata? Do you know something about this topic? Extensive reading? No more? No more ideas about extensive reading? All right. Okay, don't worry about it. So let's see. Here, what is extensive reading? Extensive reading in general terms is free voluntary reading. Notice here what is extensive one. Free voluntary reading. In other terms, it's reading for pleasure. This is the extensive reading. Reading for pleasure. And reading, this is what Lucy wanted to say, I think so. Reading without looking up all the unknown words, word highly correlated with overall, notice, the overall language proficiency. Notice what is extensive reading. Reading for pleasure, voluntary. So you are going to read something because you like it. Because you like it. And you're going to understand and comprehend the test in an overall way, not something in detail. This is what Lucy wanted to say, right? The extensive reading. Remember, this is a reading for pleasure. You read something because you like it, not because your teacher told you to read. No, because you like it. But now, so teacher, so we are not going to use extensive reading in class because the teacher in the class give the students some tests to be read. Not exactly, because we can give some ideas, no? Some ideas to your student. This is what we're going to do, or to talk about on the next slide. Extensive reading is a highly individualized approach to reading improvement. So you read it on your own, personally. Students, notice, students select their own books and read at their own pace. This is the extensive reading. So students are going to read something by their own, and they are going to select their books, and they are going to do it in their own pace, their own speed. All right? The teacher, so now, so if it is free, the student is going to decide what to read and how long is going to take this reading. So what is the role of the teacher? So the teacher should guide students to select books at a level or comprehension that allows for comprehensible input. This is what Cushing, no, this famous linguist, said, no, a comprehensible input. So you can give some ideas, no, some guidance to your students in order to select the books, because they could select a novel, but in this novel, so the vocabulary and the grammatical structure are so complicated in order to be understood. So it's not gonna be a good idea that you allow the students to choose this book, right? So you can, oh yeah, I think that you can change to another book similar to this topic or to this genre, and you can give some ideas to your students, and they could read freely with the comprehensible input. Remember, with the comprehensible input. Remember, input, maybe you can understand this term. Input is the language that you're going to receive, all right? Yeah, remember this term, the input and the output. Input is what you receive, what you are going to decodify. This is the input. The output is what you produce, all right? What you produce. For example, the reading and listening skills are called input skills because you are going to receive, no? You're going to receive. And the output skills are the writing and speaking. Yeah? Don't forget about this term. Input is what you receive, all right? Similar to computing terms, no? Input devices and output devices, no? Input devices, what are the input devices in computing? If you know something about computing terms, input devices. What are the input devices? The keyboard, no? The keyboard is an input device. The output devices, the printer. Notice, this is similar to the language, no? To the scale language. The input is what you receive. The output is what you're going to produce. All right? Now, let's continue. The emphasis is on the quantity of books read and the students' enjoyment of their books. Remember that this kind of reading is reading for pleasure. So students must enjoy what they read or what they are going to read. And it's not important here the structure, no, the content. The emphasis, notice, is the quantity. So if the students can read as many books as they can, it's better. All right? It's better. Students are never tested formally. Notice there is not a formal testing, yeah, a formal assessment. No, you're going to test because you're going to use it in the class. You're going to test, but in an informal way. Yeah, there are never tests formally under extensive reading. However, they are required to talk about the books they read in structured activities or including book conferences with the teacher, brief oral reports to the class, and discussions in small group settings. So notice the activities that you could do with your students in order to test if they read it or not, no? Because you could say, yeah, read, but maybe the student's not going to read it. So how can you check their reading process or progress? By doing these activities, no? So they are going to talk about the book. They are going to maybe give oral reports, no? Brief oral report, brief, notice brief, not extensive oral reports, brief. Or maybe a discussion, no? In small groups. So notice doing these activities, you are checking, you are testing, but informally, no? Informally, it's not a formal, no, you're not gonna say, yeah, after you finish reading your book, so you're gonna have a test. You have to answer some questions about the test. No, because they are not going to read it for pleasure. They are going to read it because you told them that they are going to have a test, an exam, and it's not extensive. All right, notice the difference. Notice the difference, okay? Important facts when you apply extensive reading in your class. The most important, they must be interesting. All right? Because if the student is not motivated on this test, he's not going to read it. Tests must be level appropriate in the terms of vocabulary and grammar. Now, this is related to the comprehensible input, no? You must give them some ideas, what kind of books they could choose or they can choose according to the vocabulary and grammar that they manage, that they know, all right? The goal is to absorb unknown words through context and to build reader confidence and enjoyment. Notice what is the goal, the aim of this kind of reading. To absorb, notice, not to analyze the meaning, the structure, no, to absorb, to acquire unknown words. So it means that they are going to learn the meaning, or they are going to guess the meaning or predict the meaning according to the context. And one of the most important aspects of extensive reading is that they are going to build confidence and enjoyment, no? Because most of our students, and you know it, they don't like reading. And nowadays it's hard for us to make your student read something because they are most used to use graphics, visual images, videos, motion. And when you present them something written, oh, teacher, this is boring. All right? Yes. So nowadays it's hard for us to make our students read something, and most in a foreign language or second language. If they are not so interested in reading something in their own language, imagine reading something in the second or foreign language. So it's more complicated. So try to use this extensive reading to make your students get confidence when they read and enjoy reading. Tests for extensive reading must be a moderate length. Notice here, this is very important. Specifically, a test should be, this is one advice, one tip, should be an average at least of 15 or 30 pages long, no more. Right? That's why the role of the teacher, the role of the teacher in this kind of reading is like a moderator, like an advisor, because the students are gonna choose the test, but with some guidance, not completely free, not completely free, because they are going to choose maybe other levels of grammar, vocabulary, no? or maybe a book with too many pages and it's gonna be so complicated. No, for example, one of my students told me when I tried to apply this, teacher, can I read the Harry Potter series? But ooh, this is 7, 8 books, I think so. It's too long, right? Yeah, it's good, but and I gave them other kind of material, other kind of test similar to this topic, to this genre. Okay, teacher, yeah, I'm gonna read it. All right. So notice the teacher is like a guidance, like an advisor, a moderator. You could choose some books and you can present them to your students and they are gonna choose. All right. So this is the most important thing here in extensive reading. Now, what materials can we use for extensive reading? Notice here. You have here some pictures related to graded readers. Have you heard about this? Do you know what a graded reader is? Do you know something about it? Graded reader? Yes or no? Tell me, what is a graded reader? Yeah, a magazine is not a graded reader. Graded readers. For example, here on the button, at the bottom, you have graded readers. What is a graded reader? No, nobody. Yeah, let me tell you. A graded reader is an adapted test, adapted literary test, according to the level of the student, according to the language that you want to practice, or the grammar, the vocabulary that you want to use. So we call this a graded reader. Remember, a graded reader is a non-authentic material because it's an adaptation of the original one. Remember, graded reader is an adaptation of the original literary text, according to the level, according to the language that you want to use, according to the vocabulary that you want to use. So we call this graded reader. All right? Remember, for example, here you can see at the bottom, at the bottom, you can see some of these graded readings. Could be from original books, or could be some short biographies. For example, you could see here Usain Bolt, or some other famous people, but in a graded way. So it means the level, the vocabulary and the grammar that you can see in this test is adapted to the level of the student. From A, the levels, according to the CFRC, the Common European Framework. So we have A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, So we have these levels, according to the international exams. So we have A1, A2 is a basic level, B1 is pre-intermediate, B2 is intermediate, C1 and C2 advanced. So according to these levels, you can have graded reader. You can have a graded reader, for example, from this famous Gulliver's Travels. You can find in A1 or A2 the same literary test, but adapted according to the level of your students. So we call this the graded readers. Notice we could use this, all right? Here, for example, you can find also online materials, digital materials. For example, I'd advise you to check, I don't know if you have checked it before, this online platform, Project Gutenberg. Have you seen it before? Have you seen it before? Project Gutenberg?
No, teacher.
No. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I advise you to check it. Yeah. It's a very good platform. You can download free books. You don't have to pay anything. And most of them are in English, not because you have some books in Italian, French, and Spanish, but most of the books are in English. You can find it in PDF, EPUB, or you can find it in audiobooks. So you have here a lot of material that you could use if you want to use the extensive reading in your class. With pictures, with no pictures, oof, we'll have a lot of material to be used. All right. So I advise you to use it. Okay. I advise you to use it. Project Gutenberg. Remember, Project Gutenberg. Monolingual or native books. No, this is authentic material. These books, magazines. This is what Flor wrote in the chat. You could use magazines, comic books. For example, I remember once that I used this, a kind of comic book. Yeah, it's a kind of comic book, but with original text. There was Romeo and Juliet, but in manga editions. No? Now you know that nowadays our students, kids, or teenagers specifically, they are more keen on this Asian literature, Asian dance, no music, Asian art. So I tried to find something related to this taste, no? And I found on internet one manga. It was a manga. I don't know if you have heard about this manga, but with this famous play, that is William Shakespeare play, Romeo and Juliet, but in a manga edition. So my students got surprised. Teacher, how could you get that? The Romeo and Juliet in a manga edition. So it's like a comic, no? It's like a comic book. So notice, try to do this. You can find on internet a lot of material. A lot of material. Then I'm going to give you a page, apart from the Project Gutenberg, I'm going to give you a page that you can download books freely. All right, freely. Literature books, phonetics books, grammar books, whatever you want. Then I'm going to give you, right? So notice the materials that you could use in extensive reading. Now, what are the benefits of using extensive reading? Development of a positive attitude toward reading. Notice, because most of our students have a negative attitude to reading in a second language specifically, no? Motivation to read more. Increased reading fluency. Gains in vocabulary and grammar knowledge, but they are going to absorb, they are not going to analyze the grammar structures or identify the kind of words. No. Because if you do that, you are doing the other one, the intensive reading. Here, the students are not going to analyze the grammar structure. What is the tense of this sentence? No, they are going to absorb. They are going to acquire. Improvement in writing in the second language. If they read more, so they're going to have more vocabulary to write. This is according to this famous linguist too, Day and Bamford, 1998. So notice the benefits of extensive reading. Now remember, extensive reading is related to reading for pleasure, enjoyment. All right? Now, here we're going to talk about some aspects related to extensive reading according to some authors, linguists, and so on. One of these people is Iwahori, 2008, and Kusanagi, 2004, said that extensive reading increasing the reading rate. So when you use this extensive reading, so the reading rate increase. There is an increase in language proficiency too, according to Bell and according to Shaw, 2001, 2003. So there is an increase in language proficiency. Increase in attitude, positive attitude. Cho and Crushing, 1994. Increase in reading, writing, listening proficiency. Eli and Mungaval, 1981. Increasing in vocabulary knowledge, Hortz, 2005. And increasing motivation, Takase and Eli, 2003 and 1991, so on. Right? So notice the benefits of extensive reading. You can increase your students a lot of aspects, motivation, interest of reading. You increase your students' range of vocabulary, proficiency. They absorb, notice they absorb, they are not going to analyze, they absorb grammar, structures, vocabulary. All right? Oh, Flor said historietas. Yeah, comic books is historietas, no? in Spanish. Yes, you're right, Flor. And also, they increase other skills too, not just reading, writing, listening, so they can produce and understand better, right? So it's very important to use this extensive reading. Now, let's pass to the other one, the intensive reading. What is the intensive reading? I give you some tips, some clues related to intensive reading. I gave you some clues about it. What is intensive reading? Notice here the picture. What are the children doing? What are they doing? Can you tell me? Can you tell me? What are they doing?
They are looking for words, I think.
Yeah, all right, Valeria. Yeah. Okay, okay. What else? What else? No more ideas? No more ideas? What are they doing? What are they using? What object? Diana?
They are using their attention.
Yeah. What object? What object are they using?
Looking for a specific information.
Yeah. All right. All right. Yeah, but I want you to describe the picture because we are going to make a contrast. Oh, Vanessa, tell me.
Kids are very concentrated.
Yeah.
They are using a magnifying glass.
Exactly. They are using a magnifying glass. Yeah, Valeria?
Yes, teacher. They are so concentrated with the magnifying glass, teacher.
Exactly.
One of the boy it has less age.
Yeah. Yes. All right. That's good. No, one of the boys are younger. No, they are one of these are younger. Okay. Yeah. So notice here we use this picture because this the purpose of using this picture is not literally, is metaphorically. So when we talked about intensive reading, we're going to do something similar to what the children are doing. So they are using this magnifying glass to look very carefully the text, right? So maybe they cannot see, maybe the letters are too small. So they are using these magnifying glasses to look the text better in a deeper way. So they are looking thoroughly the text. And this is what intensive reading is related to. So in intensive reading, we're going to read intensively. It means that we are going to completely deconstruct a text with the goal of absorbing as much meaning from it as possible. Notice on the other side, in the extensive reading, you just read for pleasure. The purpose is to get an overall, an overall language proficiency, overall, general. Remember, overall means general. But here, no. Here we have to be very, very careful, and we try to get as much as meaning as we can from the text. And notice here the word deconstruct a text. So we are going to make this bigger part into smaller parts. Deconstruct. No, when you talked about construction, you construct something, you build something with a smaller part to make a bigger one, right? So now we have the bigger one, and we are going to decodify it into smaller parts to get a very carefully understanding of the text. As much meaning as you can. Notice, this is the intensive reading, like the boys are doing. No? They are using the magnifying glass to look at carefully the letters or some information because maybe it is not so clear, right? So it is used as a metaphorical way, no? In order to compare it to the intensive reading. So how do you do that? This is done by taking a test and systematically, notice, systematically looking up every word, phrase, or collocation that you don't understand. Again, the contrast with the previous one. Extensive. It doesn't matter if you don't understand a word or you don't know the meaning of a word, because you're going to absorb the meaning from the context. But here not. Here you have to be very careful. You need to understand every word, every phrase, or every collocation that you don't understand. That's why he says look up. No? Look up. The main goal of intensive reading is to understand the literal as well as the underlying meaning of the text and gain maximum understanding of it. So notice, here we're going to understand not just a literal one, also the underlying meaning, or in other terms, the figurative meaning or contextual meaning, all right? Or rhetorical meaning. So not just a literal one. So the comprehension is deeper. And if we do that, this improves reading skills, vocabulary, and grammatical knowledge. So here we could find some of the benefits. No? Then we are going to talk about more the benefits, but here you have some of the benefits when you do this kind of reading, the intensive one. In intensive reading, we have two aspects too. The linguistic reading. What is the relationship between phonemes and graphemes and linguistics and semantic aspects of the language? That's why linguistic, all right? Linguistic reading is related to the language, the analysis of the language, the relationship between phonemes and graphemes, so sounds with letters, no? In simple words, sounds with letters. And it's complicated for our students, no? Because in English, there are some words that are written in some way and are pronounced in another way. It's very complicated. And also other aspects, no, related to linguistics, no? The meaning of words or the uses of words, no, in context. So we are going to talk about the analysis of the language. So this is called the linguistic reading, all right? Linguistic reading. And the other one is the content reading. So all the skills required for students to read and understand the literal meaning, implications, and rhetorical relationships. So here we have these two aspects of intensive reading. You're going to read to get all the information possible in a test by analyzing some aspects of the language that is written in the test, obviously, and also to understand the meaning of the test in a literal way, some implications, and some rhetorical relationships too. So these are the two aspects of intensive reading. Remember, linguistic and content reading. Now, let's consider some aspects and facts when you apply intensive reading in class. Tests, again, similar to the extensive one, tests must be interesting too, but students will have more mental resistance to the intensive reading process because they are going to be asked to analyze the test, to analyze the test. The test must be interesting, but students will have this resistance, mental resistance, because they are going to be asked to analyze the test. Tests obviously must be short, because if you present to students a long test and you ask them to analyze the language, it's going to be hard for them and also boring. Because the end goal is to understand the test down to the most minute detail. Notice, they have to understand the test in the most minute detail. That's why the test must be short. On the other side, in the extensive, notice here 15 to 30 pages. Here, no, very short, a short test. Now, what kind of materials can we use for intensive reading? Notice here the materials. So you could use news articles. Remember that the test must be short. Yeah? News articles, short articles. Wikipedia articles, well, some of them, yeah, because there are some Wikipedia articles that are too long. So you must choose. It must be short, not too long. All right, you could use this, Wikipedia articles. Short stories. You could use short stories, fables, tales. Blog post. Nowadays we are in a digital era, so nowadays most of our reading are in blogs, blog posts, comments, blog comments. You know what's a blog? Blog is a web page, a personal web page that you can put some information and you can receive some comments or posts. We call these comments post, so they could read that. All right, they could read this blog post. And also some test books, that we use in class. You know that in some schools we use some books related to some editorials, so we could use them, because they present some material to read. So notice the different materials that we could use to practice the intensive reading. Articles, news articles, mostly could be digital or printed, wherever you want. Stories, short stories, blog posts, or test books. So these are the material that you could use to practice the intensive reading. Now, what are the benefits of intensive reading? It provides a base to study structure, vocabulary, and idioms. You know what is an idiom, It's colloquial expressions, idiomatic expressions. It provides a base for students to develop a greater control of the language. Notice, a base for students to develop a greater control of the language, because they are going to analyze it. All right, they are going to analyze it. They are going to study it. It provides for a check on the degree of comprehension for individual students. So you can check, You can check the degree of comprehension of your students, because you can have here formal tests or formal exercises, no? Some specific exercises, activities to check comprehension. That's why here says for individual students, no? You can see, oh no, this student couldn't get this comprehension, but the other one, yes, because he answered better. So you can check that with the intensive reading, all right? But you cannot do this with the extensive one, no? Because in the extensive one, you have an overall, a general understanding of the test. Now, in order to give a sum up, we are going to analyze some differences between extensive and intensive reading. And here we are going to answer some questions. Why? The amount or quantity, difficulty, who selects, what, where, and comprehension check. And you're gonna help me to complete this table. Yeah? Why? What is the reason? What is the goal? Why means the goal, the aim of these kind of readings? The first one I'm going to do it, and you're going to help me with the other ones, all right? So listen carefully, pay attention. So you have to tell me the answers to complete this table. Let's just start with why. In the intensive reading, the purpose here is the language, language focus. In the extensive, fluency, meaning focus. Remember, what is the purpose of intensive reading? To analyze. That's why here we have linguistic reading and counter reading. You are going to, or you want to get as much as meaning as you can. So the focus is on the language. The language focus. On the other side, in extensive reading, what is the focus? Fluency. That they could read as much as they can. Notice here, the other side is that they could get as much meaning as they can. But on the extensive, they can read as much as they can. Notice the difference. Fluency, meaning focus, and language focus. Amount. Tell me, please. How much they can read in extensive reading? Tell me. Amount. The quantity. No, nobody?
More portion, 100%, for example.
100%?
It's more portion, but I don't know how much.
Yeah. The intensive one is more percent. Yes? Are you sure? Intensive. Let's start with the intensive, and then we pass to the extensive. Yeah. First intensive, then extensive.
All the books they want, because they are in intensive reading. Students are reading because they are going to enjoy the reading, so they can choose all the books.
Yeah, this is the intensive reading. Are you sure? This is the intensive one?
That's the extensive. That's the extensive. I'm talking about extensive reading.
Yes,
Students
you're right.
read all the books that they want, so they can choose.
Exactly.
They are reading for free, to be free, something like that.
Yes, you're right. So the intensive, what is the amount in the intensive reading? Because the intensive is correct. And the intensive one?
A few books.
Yes. So in intensive reading, yes. In intensive reading is
the opposite. The opposite, extensive, all the books they want, and in intensive reading, just a few books,
Short text,
selectively, short text, 15 paragraphs, 30 paragraphs, no, pages, 15 pages, books of 15 pages or 30 pages.
Yeah, this is in the extensive, no? The extensive is 15 to 30 pages. But the intensive is less. Short test, very little. Notice here. In the intensive reading, the amount...
But 15 pages.
Yeah, 15 pages and 30 pages. Yeah, you consider a few pages. Yeah, but for students, remember that we're talking about students. For students, 15 pages and 30 pages. All right.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Don't worry, Vanessa. So notice here, intensive reading, the reading is very little because they are going to analyze. Notice the focus of this kind of reading is language, to analyze the language, to get as much meaning as they can. So if you give a test of 15 pages or 30 pages to read and analyze it, they are going to be bored. They are going to be bored. You give 15 pages, 30 pages to be analyzed, it is not so good to do it because they are going to be bored and stressed because, oh, I need to do a lot of exercises to this. No.
Yeah.
So
maybe for us, but for students, yeah, it would be so bored, complicated, frustrated. Frustrating.
Yes, that's it. So notice here the amount is very little. And notice here on the other side, they could read a book at a week or two, maybe 2 books per month. So as Vanessa says, so they can choose, the amount of books that they could read. But don't forget, as a teacher, we have to guide them. Yeah? We have to guide them because it's not so completely free, no? You have to guide them what the level of the book, the vocabulary, the grammar, no? And this is related to the difficulty. So in intensive reading is hard. And in extensive reading, easy. That's why you, as a teacher, must guide them because they can choose a book with a lot of vocabulary, a lot of new vocabulary, with a lot of grammar structure and complex grammar structures. So there's gonna be purpose of motivating your students to read because they don't know, so difficult, teacher. A lot of new words. There's so many structures that I don't know. No, I don't like it. Yeah. So in extensive reading, the test must be easy to read for them. But in intensive reading, the test could be hard because they need to analyze. They have to look up the new words, in a dictionary, monolingual, bilingual. They are going to do some exercises to analyze the vocabulary, looking for synonyms or matchings with definitions. You have seen this kind of exercises, when you are giving a short test, an article, and after before reading activities, during during reading activities, so they have to analyze the vocabulary or what grammatical structures they can use, or synonyms or antonyms. So notice here, it's a more deeply a study of the test. That's why here it's hard. Now, who selects? Who selects?
Intensive students.
In intensive, the student? Intensive. Extensive. All right. And intensive?
Someone, the teacher or the assistant.
Oh, Zoraida. Zoraida, your microphone.
Todas las 5.
Intensive, the student, but with the guidance of teacher.
Yeah. In the intensive, remember, in the intensive, the teacher selects the books, the material to be read, because he is going to choose, no? He's going to choose the article, short paragraphs, short text. But in the extensive, the student, remember, the teacher selects in the intensive and the extensive, the student. But remember, but it doesn't mean that the teacher is not going to do anything. No, the student chooses the book, but with some advice from the teacher. Don't forget it. Don't forget, it's not completely free. It's not completely free. Because some of the students could choose a topic that is not so relevant to their learning or to get some values or costumes, no? Because nowadays you can find a lot of books from different topics with different points of views. So you must be careful on that. You must be careful on that. What are they going to read? Generally, in intensive reading, we use the text books. All right? We're going to use the text books. And in extensive reading, materials at a smooth reading level. No? As we have seen it before, generally we use here graded readers, no? Magazines, no? Related, but remember, related or according to the level of your student. All right? That's why here says material at a smooth reading level. So not so complicated to read. Not so complicated to read. Now, where are they gonna read this?
In class.
In class. So, the intensive reading in class. Yeah. Yes, and the extensive reading, notice, in class at first, then home. Notice here, intensive is used principally in class because they are going to analyze, the teacher is going to check their understanding. Oh, Abraham, your microphone, please. Thank you, thank you. So in class, because the teacher is going to check their understanding, their comprehension, he is going to analyze if they are doing the exercises correctly. So they need to check, the teacher needs to check their comprehension ability. That's why it is developed in class. But the extensive one could be at home and in the class too. No, remember, it doesn't mean that it's intensive, it's free, the student choose, so they can do it at home. Yeah, but you have to do it in class too, because you have to test, but not formally. Remember, in extensive, you're going to test, but not formally, by giving some reports, oral reports, or maybe some discussions, debates about this book, or you have to give your opinions about the book. No, what do you think about the book that you have read? Give me your ideas. So this is an informal testing, an informal checking. But on the other side, the intensive reading, it's a formal testing, a formal checking. And finally, the comprehension check. How can you check comprehension? In intensive reading, you check comprehension with exercises. And on extensive reading, you don't need exercises. Notice here the differences between these two kind of readings, extensive and intensive reading. So we have a lot of differences and they are used in class. One of them is used in class and also at home. That is the extensive one. Sometimes we don't practice this kind of reading because it takes a lot of time, no? It takes a lot of time. We mostly practice the intensive one because it's shorter, because you can control the time of reading, right? Yeah. Okay, my dear students. So I'm going to give you this test. You made some before reading activities, and then, yeah, you have 10 to 15 minutes to read and complete the exercises. Then so you control, you control the time of reading, you control the kind of assessment or evaluation, you control everything. And you feel better, right, as a teacher, because you can control it. But on the other side, you don't have the total control. And it takes a lot of time, because maybe you can give to your students to read a test for 1 month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But on the other side, you do it in 30 minutes, no more, or 40 minutes. But on the other side, no, it takes more time. When they speak, you need more time too. All right, you need more time too. So it's not part of your control. That's why we use most intensive reading than extensive reading. All right, but I advise you to use the extensive one. No, the extensive is better because they can acquire. No, for example, I tell to my students, not from a school, from the university, because I teach also at the university, to try to acquire the language, and they can read whatever they want. No, for example, I told them, if you have read a novel in Spanish, so now read it in English. If you like it, you love it, so now read it in English. And you could have a better idea because you know about the topic, you know about the characters, you know about the details, and now you're going to read it in English, so it's going to be easier. One, or first, because you like the book. Second, because you have the overall meaning of the book, and you can understand better, and you can understand the unknown words from the context because you know the context. So it's better and it's easier. All right. So notice here these tips. All right. So you have these differences between the extensive and intensive reading. Now, let's pass to the last point of the class, yeah, because with this point, we are going to finish the class, and we are going to talk about some micro skills for reading comprehension. So you know that reading is the general skill, not the main skill, but inside this main skill, we have some micro skills in order to comprehend a test. For example, you have discriminate among the distinctive graphemes and orthographic patterns of English. No, this is related to the intensive reading. No, this micro skill is related to the intensive reading because you need to discriminate the graphemes and the orthographic patterns of English. Second, retain chunks of language of different lengths in short-term memory. Chunks. Remember, when we talk about the word chunks, it's related to a group of words, all right? A group of words. So you need to retain groups of words of a language of different lengths in short-term memory. Three, process writing at efficient rate of speed to suit the purpose. So here you have a connection with the writing skill. So you need to process this writing in efficient rate of speed, and you can read at the same speed. All right. Recognize a core of words and interpret word order patterns and their significance. This is related to the intensive reading. To recognize words, interpret the word order. This is related to the grammatical structures, no? And their meaning, significance. 5, recognize grammatical word classes, systems, patterns, rules, and elliptical forms. Elliptical, we call this ellipsis. This is a process. Now, when we short phrases, we short sentences, or we short words too. 6, recognize that a particular meaning may be expressed in different grammatical forms. This is very important to tell to your students, no? And they could get this micro skill that a word can have different grammatical forms, and they could have particular meaning depending on the context that you are using this word. Recognize cohesive devices in written discourse and their role in signaling the relationship between and among clauses. Cohesive devices are the words that we use, as here the name says, to make cohesion to our text, to connect. No? Cohesion is related to connection, to connect our ideas, our phrases, our sentences. So we call this cohesive devices. That's why here it says in written discourse, right? Because you're going to read and you must recognize these cohesive devices and the role, no, in signaling the relationship between and among clauses. Clauses, remember, when we talk about clauses, clauses is similar to say to a phrase or sentence. It's better to say a sentence. But what is the difference between a clause and a sentence? Clause, if we talked about in the structural way, they are similar, all right? Because clause and a sentence have a subject, have a verb, and have a complement, all right? Clauses. Clause could have a subject, a verb, and a complement. But what is the difference with a sentence? Because a sentence also has a subject, a verb, and a complement. So both structural, they are similar, they are equal or the same. But what is the difference between a clause and a sentence? That a clause doesn't have a complete meaning, and a sentence had a complete meaning or complete sense. So here, when we join, notice, when we write something, or when the writer, no, because we're going to read what a person writes. So when the writer writes something, so he's going to join these clauses. That's why here it says cohesive devices. So he's going to use some words to connect, these clauses. Let me give you a clear example, no? Conditional sentences. No, you know what is a conditional sentence, right? Yes? We have 4 conditionals, no? 0, first, second, and third. All right? Conditionals, yes?
Yes.
Well, when we make a conditional sentence, it is composed by 2 clauses, right?
Right.
Okay. So if you take out 1 clause, the clause that you left doesn't have a complete sense. For example, no? A very simple example. If you study hard, you will pass your exam. Imagine that I take out, you will pass your exam. You just have, if you study hard. It doesn't have a complete sentence. It has the structure of a sentence. If you study hard, you have the subject, you have the verb, and you have a complement. It seems like a sentence, all right? In the structure, if we analyze the structure, it's like a sentence, but it's not a sentence because it doesn't have a complete meaning. If you study hard, yeah, but you need something more, no? You need something more to have a complete meaning. So this is a clause, all right? This is a clause, and in this case, it's a subordinated clause, no? A dependent clause. And what is the cohesive device? What is the cohesive device? If you're joining these 2 clauses with the cohesive device, that is, if you study hard, you will pass your exam. And remember that you can change the order, no? You will pass your exam if you study hard. Yeah, here is better, no? Because you have in the middle, no? Because sometimes you put it at the beginning, but teacher, it's at the beginning. It is not connecting, but it's connecting because you're using a comma, no? You use also punctuation marks as a cohesion devices, not just words. You could use also the punctuation marks as a cohesion devices. So notice, this is the purpose. So the reader, notice, the reader must have this micro skill. The reader must be able to recognize the cohesive devices in written discourse in order to recognize easily the relationship between and among clauses. All right? Between when you have two clauses, among when you have 3, 4 more clauses. Remember, the translation is the same, but the use is different. Between when you have 2, among when you have 3, 4, 5 and more. All right? So that's why here says between and among clauses.
Teacher.
Yeah, tell me, Abraham.
Teacher, we learning about clauses during this or in this program.
Yes, when we talk about syntax, the last module we talked about it. Remember that we talked about clauses, phrases, and sentences. Yes, we talked about a clause. What is a clause? When we talked about that type of sentences, remember? When we talked about that type of sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences. So we have one independent clause, one dependent clause, or 2 independent clauses, the compound. Remember that we talked about what is a clause. Try to get back to the syntax and you can find more information about clauses. Yes, but we did it. We talked about clauses. So here I'm giving you a review, a feedback about what a clause is. But remember, clause structurally is like a sentence, but it's not a sentence because of the meaning, the sense. That's the difference between a clause and a sentence. Don't forget. And we use cohesive devices to join these sentences, to join these clauses. All right? And the reader, as I told you, must recognize this. Number 8, recognize the rhetorical forms of written discourse and their significance for interpretation. Here, when we talk about the rhetorical forms, it's related to the different ways of expressing something. Yeah, this is the rhetorical forms. That's why here it says interpretation. All right? Their significance for interpretation. Number 9, we are just getting to the end. Oh, yeah. Recognize the communicative functions of written text according to form and purpose. Notice this is the metacognitive, no? The metacognitive theory. So they need to understand why are they reading, what are they reading. The functions, communicative functions of written text, according to the form or type and according to the purpose of reading. If they are going to read for general information, if they are going to read for a specific information, if they are going to read for details, notice they need to know, or they have to be able to recognize what is the purpose of reading and the communicative functions of the written text. For example, if you present to your students an article, so what is the communicative function of an article? To give you information about an accident or maybe about a real story, no? Real information. But if you give them a fable or a tale, so what is the communicative function? To read something for pleasure, not to imagine some situations. Notice the function of each test is different. All right? The communicative function is different. For example, if you give them to read a fable, no? Sub-fables. So here you have some morals. So they could learn some values, no? They could learn some values, customs, good habits. Notice the communicative function of each test changes. And finally, infer. Now this is another micro skill in reading, no? Inferring. Infer context that is not explicit by using background knowledge. No, this is related to, and also here you have other inferring links and connections between events, ideas, deduce causes and effects, and detect such relations as main idea, supporting idea, new information, giving information, generalization, and exemplification. So they are going to infer. Notice the previous one related to something that is not explicit. Remember, using what? Their schemata, background knowledge. And the other inferring is the link and connection between the ideas, the events. They need to deduce causes and effects. They need to detect the main idea, the supporting idea, which information is new, which information is given. If it is in a general way, if you can give some examples, no exemplification. So notice here all that the reader must have when they are going to comprehend, no? When they are going to read a test. All right. And you have, they have to distinguish between literal and implied meanings. All right. Literal and implied meanings. The literal meaning and the contextual meaning. So this is very important, no? A literal meaning and a contextual meaning. All right? Well, so we are going to stop here. Nos vamos a quedar entonces aquí. Miren, como un pequeño repasito rápido, ¿ya? Hemos visto enfocado hoy día la sesión de hoy día en estos dos tipos de lectura que tratemos de practicarlo, ¿no? Tratemos de practicar ambas en nuestras clases, lo que es la lectura extensa e intensa, ¿no? Extensive and intensive reading, ¿no? La lectura intensive reading, acuérdense que es más que todo para una lectura para disfrutar, para absorber naturalmente la información, que no sea analítica. Eso es, en simple resumen, lo que es el extensive reading. Vamos a absorber de manera natural todo ese vocabulario, toda esa gramática, sin analizarla. El estudiante es el que escoge sus libros, pero con guía del docente, del profesor, no es completamente libre. Si es que lo queremos utilizar en clase, debe haber una guía del profesor. Ya si no lo vamos a monitorear nosotros, ahí sí el alumno puede escoger libremente, ¿no? Pero si lo vamos a utilizar en clase, dime, Abraham.
When we read magazines or newspapers or some articles, we apply in this reading.
Magazines, as we have seen, magazines is very used in extensive one, no? Extensive one. The articles are mostly used in intensive because they are short. Acuérdense, los artículos más que todo se utilizan en intensivo porque son cortos, son pequeños, entonces lo puede utilizar en clase para que hagan un análisis de ese texto. En cambio, los magazines tiene bastantes artículos, ¿no? Dentro de una revista hay una cantidad inmensa. Puedo agarrar, sí, un artículo de una revista y puedo utilizarla en clase y la convierto en intensiva. Pero si quiero que me lean todo el magazine, ya no sería intensiva. Ahí depende cómo también utilizo el material, ¿no? Va a depender mucho de qué enfoque yo le quiera dar a ese material para que lean. Si quiero que lo lean de manera intensa o extensa. Entonces, si es intensa, agarro una revista y veo, ya este artículo está interesante, y lo llevo a la clase. Solo un artículo del magazine, no todos los artículos, solo uno. Entonces ahí lo convierto en intenso, pero es un artículo. En cambio, si yo les digo, leamos todos los artículos, por ejemplo, esto creo que no sé si lo seguirá practicando el himno. Los hacían leer, por ejemplo, este librito, en inglés era Reader's Digest, no sé si alguna vez lo habrán leído ustedes. Y me acuerdo que los profesores les pedían, pues, hacían un trabajo de lectura intensa y extensa, porque hacían ejercicios para un artículo, escogía un artículo el docente y realizaba ciertos ejercicios de comprensión lectora, pero también les hacía escoger ya de todos los magazines qué artículo les gustó, cuál fue el más de su agrado, qué opinión tienen de eso, den un pequeño reporte. Entonces miren, con esa revista el docente utilizó estos dos tipos de lectura, la intensiva y la extensiva, ¿eh? The intensive and extensive. O sea, yo lo puedo ir adecuando también, ¿no? Pero generalmente si hablo de magazine, como tiene bastantes artículos, tiene bastantes páginas, más se relaciona a una extensiva que una intensiva. Si yo agarro algo de ahí sí lo convierto en intensivo, ¿ya? Entonces hemos visto, miren, esto que es muy importante, ¿no? Y hay veces por tiempo, hay veces solamente nos dedicamos a lo que es el intensivo, ¿no? Es más fácil de controlar, más que todo veo los resultados más rápido porque veo si hicieron bien o no los ejercicios, si entendieron bien los ejercicios o no, o respondieron bien a las preguntas. O sea, es de un control más rápido y yo lo puedo realizar. En cambio, el extensivo no es tanto, ¿no? Tiene más tiempo, se desarrolla en más tiempo, para que ellos hagan sus reportes también, ¿no? Toma bastante tiempo y hay veces lo obviamos, ¿no? Por el tiempo que tenemos que avanzar el sílabus o la currícula o terminar el libro y ya, y nos olvidamos y solo nos enfocamos en la intensiva. Pero tratemos siempre de buscar también el lado de la extensiva, ¿no? Para que el alumno se motive, ¿no? Y quiera leer en este idioma que es el inglés, ¿no? Porque a veces ni en nuestro propio idioma quieren leer. ¿Cómo será leer el segundo idioma, ¿no? En el idioma extranjero. Entonces hay que buscar ahí las estrategias. Okay, well, we are going to stop here. We are going to finish the session today. So I hope you could understand and have some information useful for you for your teaching. And see you next week. Take care a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, teacher. See you next class.
See you. Bye-bye. Take care a lot.